Our principal announced a lockdown during the shooting, then opened the doors saying, "It's just a prank and you're all overreacting." I was in Mr. Kapoor's calculus class when the first shot echoed through the hallway. The sound was sharp and unmistakable, not a locker slamming or a textbook dropping, but something that made every student freeze mid-sentence. Mr. Kapoor's marker stopped halfway through writing an equation on the whiteboard, and he turned toward the door with his face suddenly pale. 3 more shots followed in rapid succession, closer this time, and someone in the hallway screamed. I watched Mr. Kapoor's hand shake as he reached for the door handle, his other hand fumbling for his phone. He locked the door with a click that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence, then turned to face our class of 28 students. "Everyone to the back corner, away from the door and windows. Right now, no talking." His voice cracked on the last word, and that scared me more than the gunshots because Mr. Kapoor never lost his composure, not even when Jeremy Castellanos set a Bunsen burner on fire during lab last month. We moved fast, some students crawling, others crouching low as we'd practiced during lockdown drills. My best friend Alicia grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin, and we pressed ourselves against the back wall next to the supply cabinet. The intercom crackled to life and Principal Whitmore's voice filled the room, steady and authoritative like he was making morning announcements. "All staff and students, we are implementing a full lockdown. This is not a drill. Secure all doors, turn off lights, remain silent and out of sight. Emergency services have been notified. Stay where you are until you receive further instruction from law enforcement." The intercom clicked off, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and Alicia's rapid breathing next to me. Mr. Kapoor had turned off the lights and was crouched by his desk, his phone pressed to his ear, whispering urgently to someone. Through the narrow window in the classroom door, I could see the empty hallway bathed in fluorescent light, lockers standing in neat rows like silent witnesses. More shots rang out, maybe 6 or 7 in quick succession, and they sounded like they were coming from the cafeteria wing, 1 floor below us. Someone in our class started crying quietly, and Mr. Kapoor made a sharp gesture for silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out with trembling hands. 17 texts from my mom, all variations of, "Are you okay?" and "Please respond," and "I'm coming to get you." I typed back, "In lockdown, Mr. Kapoor's class, safe for now," and hit send, then silenced my phone completely. Around me, other students were doing the same, some texting parents, others checking news sites that were probably already reporting an active shooter at Riverside High School. Alicia showed me her screen where a local news alert read, "Reports of gunfire at Riverside High School, police responding." The timestamp showed it had been posted 3 minutes ago, which meant this had been going on longer than it felt. Time was moving strangely, each second stretching out while simultaneously rushing past. We heard footsteps in the hallway, running fast, and Mr. Kapoor pressed himself against the wall next to the door, holding his phone like it might protect him. The footsteps passed our classroom and continued down the hall, followed by more gunshots that made several students scream before clapping hands over their mouths. I was counting shots in my head without meaning to, trying to calculate how many bullets the shooter might have, how many magazines, whether they'd run out or just keep reloading. Alicia's hand found mine and we held on to each other so tightly I lost feeling in my fingers. The girl next to me, Sophia Chen, was praying under her breath in Mandarin, her eyes squeezed shut and tears streaming down her face. Mr. Kapoor kept checking his phone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Through the door window, I watched as a figure ran past, just a blur of dark clothing and a flash of something metallic. More shots followed, and then a terrible silence that was somehow worse than the noise. The intercom crackled again and we all flinched at the sound. Principal Whitmore's voice returned, but this time it sounded different, almost irritated. "Attention all students and staff. The lockdown is now lifted. I repeat, the lockdown is lifted. All students should proceed to their regularly scheduled classes. The situation has been resolved." There was a pause, and then he added in a tone that made my stomach drop. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals were engaging in what they thought was a humorous prank. The sounds you heard were not actual gunfire. I will be addressing this matter with the students responsible. Please resume normal activities." Mr. Kapoor stared at the intercom speaker like it had personally betrayed him, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Around me, students were looking at each other with confusion and dawning relief. Some started to stand up, brushing off their clothes and laughing nervously about how scared they'd been. But something felt profoundly wrong. Those hadn't sounded like firecrackers or balloons popping. They'd sounded like gunshots. Mr. Kapoor held up his hand to stop students from moving toward the door. "Wait, nobody move yet. I need to verify this with law enforcement first." He put his phone to his ear and I watched his expression change from confusion to anger to something like horror as whoever he was talking to responded. He lowered the phone slowly and looked at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "The principal is opening the classroom doors manually. He's telling everyone to go to the auditorium for an assembly about the prank." His voice was hollow, and he didn't move to unlock our door. The girl who'd been crying, a sophomore named Rebecca Walsh, stood up fully and brushed off her jeans. "So it really was just a prank? Oh my god, I actually thought we were going to die. My mom is going to kill me for scaring her like that." She laughed, high and slightly hysterical, and moved toward the door. Several other students followed her lead, their relief palpable. But Mr. Kapoor stepped in front of the door, blocking it. I said, "Wait, something isn't right here." That's when we heard Principal Whitmore's voice in the hallway, loud and cheerful like he was greeting students at a football game. "Come on out, everyone, it's perfectly safe. We're gathering in the auditorium to discuss what happened and why pranks like this are unacceptable. Let's go, time to move along." I heard the sound of a door unlocking, then another, metal clicking as locks disengaged. Mr. Kapoor's classroom door handle rattled, and we all stared at it. Then the lock clicked open from the outside. Principal Whitmore had used his master key, and the door swung inward. Principal Whitmore stood there in his usual navy suit, his gray hair perfectly combed, his face wearing an expression of mild annoyance like a parent dealing with misbehaving children. "Mr. Kapoor, I need your class in the auditorium immediately. We're addressing this situation as a school community." Mr. Kapoor didn't move from his position blocking the doorway. "Sir, with respect, I heard gunshots. Multiple rounds. That wasn't firecrackers." Principal Whitmore's smile tightened. "I assure you it was an elaborate prank involving audio equipment. The students responsible have been identified and will face appropriate consequences. Now please bring your class to the auditorium." I watched this exchange with growing dread because I could see something in Mr. Kapoor's eyes that Principal Whitmore either couldn't see or was choosing to ignore. Mr. Kapoor pulled out his phone and showed the principal his screen. "I've been on the phone with 911. They have officers en route who reported hearing the dispatch about an active shooter. They're 2 minutes out." Principal Whitmore's expression hardened, and he stepped fully into the classroom, lowering his voice so only the students nearest the door could hear, which included me since I'd moved closer when the door opened. "Mr. Kapoor, I am telling you as your supervisor that this is a false alarm. You are creating unnecessary panic by suggesting otherwise. I need you to trust my judgment on this matter." His tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath it, the voice of someone who expected to be obeyed without question. Mr. Kapoor looked past the principal into the hallway, and his face went even paler. "Sir, there's blood on the floor near the stairwell." I followed his gaze and saw it too, a dark smear on the tile about 20 feet away. Principal Whitmore turned to look, then turned back with his expression unchanged. "That's from the drama club's production. They were rehearsing earlier and must have spilled stage blood. I'll have the custodial staff clean it up." He raised his voice to address the whole class. "Everyone, please proceed to the auditorium. Staying in the classroom is only prolonging the disruption to your education." Some students started moving forward, eager to leave the cramped corner where we'd been hiding. Rebecca was first, slipping past Mr. Kapoor before he could stop her. Jeremy followed, then 3 others. I stayed pressed against the back wall with Alicia, neither of us moving. Something was screaming inside my head that this was wrong, that we shouldn't leave this room, that Principal Whitmore was lying about something fundamental. Alicia's grip on my hand tightened again, and I knew she felt it too. Mr. Kapoor made one more attempt. "Principal Whitmore, I strongly recommend we wait for law enforcement to clear the building. Standard protocol in any potential active threat situation is to—" The principal cut him off sharply. "There is no active threat. I am the authority in this building, and I am telling you it is safe. Continued resistance will be noted in your personnel file." The threat was clear, and Mr. Kapoor's shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. He stepped aside from the doorway, though his expression showed he wanted to do anything but. More students filed out, most of them talking now, the nervous energy transforming into excited chatter about the prank and how scared they'd been. Within 30 seconds, half the class had left. I looked at Mr. Kapoor and he looked back at me, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes. Alicia whispered in my ear, "We should stay here. Something's wrong." I nodded, but Principal Whitmore was watching us now, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You two in the back, let's go. The auditorium. Now." His voice held no room for argument. Slowly, reluctantly, Alicia and I stood up and moved toward the door. Mr. Kapoor put a hand on my shoulder as I passed him. "Stay alert," he murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Stay near exits." Then we were in the hallway and it looked surreally normal except for that blood smear near the stairwell that Principal Whitmore had dismissed so casually. The hallway was filling with students from other classrooms, all being herded toward the auditorium by Principal Whitmore and 2 other administrators, Vice Principal Dawson and Assistant Principal Lopez. They were all wearing the same expression of forced calm, smiling at students and making casual comments about pranks getting out of hand. But their eyes were wrong, darting around constantly, and Vice Principal Dawson had sweat beading on his forehead despite the school's aggressive air conditioning. We joined the stream of students moving toward the auditorium, a slow migration of confused teenagers talking over each other. Did you hear how realistic it sounded? I thought we were actually going to die. Who would pull a prank like that? My mom is freaking out. She's calling the school nonstop. I kept my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the emergency call button, some instinct telling me I might need it. The blood smear wasn't the only thing wrong. As we passed the main stairwell, I saw scuff marks on the wall, the kind that looked like someone had been dragged or pushed. There were also wet footprints leading away from the stairwell, dark and roughly shoe-sized. The auditorium doors were propped open, and administrators were standing on either side, ushering students in with the efficiency of people trying to move a herd quickly. I'd been in this auditorium hundreds of times for assemblies and performances, a large space with rows of worn red seats sloping down toward a stage. Usually it felt welcoming in a shabby, familiar way. Today it felt like a trap. The exits were at the back where we'd entered, and there were emergency exits on either side of the stage, but those were usually locked from the outside. As students filed in and took seats, I noticed the administrators weren't joining us. They stayed in the lobby outside, and through the glass doors I could see them talking in a tight huddle, their voices too low to hear. Principal Whitmore kept checking his watch and looking toward the main entrance. Something was very, very wrong. Alicia and I found seats near the aisle about halfway down, and Mr. Kapoor sat directly behind us, his knee bouncing anxiously. Other teachers were scattered throughout the auditorium, most looking as confused and worried as Mr. Kapoor. The auditorium was maybe 2/3 full, probably 500 students out of our school's 750 total enrollment, when Principal Whitmore finally entered through the main doors. He walked down the center aisle toward the stage with Vice Principal Dawson and Assistant Principal Lopez flanking him like security guards. They climbed the stairs to the stage, and Principal Whitmore approached the microphone at center stage, tapping it twice to test if it was on. The feedback screech made everyone wince. Students, faculty, thank you for gathering so quickly. I know today has been disruptive and frightening for many of you. I want to address what happened and provide clarity. He paused, smoothing down his tie in a gesture that seemed more nervous than professional. Approximately 20 minutes ago, several students activated audio equipment they'd hidden in various locations throughout the school. This equipment played recordings of gunshots, creating the illusion of an active threat. These students thought they were being clever, perhaps making some kind of statement about school safety drills. They were not. They were being dangerously irresponsible. The auditorium was silent except for the soft rustle of students shifting in their seats. Principal Whitmore continued, his voice gaining confidence. The students responsible have been identified and are currently being detained by law enforcement for questioning. They will face criminal charges for inducing panic and may face expulsion. I want to be absolutely clear that their actions were reprehensible and do not reflect the values of Riverside High School. He paused again, scanning the audience. I also want to address the rumors some of you may have heard or seen online. There were no actual weapons on campus. No one was injured. The blood some students reported seeing was from our drama department's earlier rehearsal. Everything is under control, and you are completely safe. Behind me, Mr. Kapoor made a sound low in his throat that might have been disagreement. Principal Whitmore heard it, his eyes snapping to our section of the auditorium. I understand some of you may still feel uncertain. That's natural after a scare like this. But I need you to trust that the adults in this building have your best interests at heart and would never put you in danger. Something about the way he emphasized trust made my skin crawl. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages, scrolling through the texts from my mom. Her most recent one, sent 2 minutes ago, read, "News is saying police are surrounding the school and won't let parents in. They're saying there might still be a shooter inside. Please tell me you're safe." I showed the message to Alicia and watched the color drain from her face. She pulled out her own phone and showed me similar messages from her dad, who was apparently in the parent crowd gathered outside the police barricade. I raised my hand slowly, and Principal Whitmore's eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made me want to lower it again, but I forced myself to speak. "Sir, my mom says the police are treating this like an active shooter situation. They won't let parents into the building. If it was just a prank, why would they do that?" The auditorium went even quieter, every student now paying attention. Principal Whitmore's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "The police are following standard protocol when they receive reports of potential threats. They'll clear the building room by room, realize there's no danger, and stand down. It's procedure. Nothing to worry about." Another student, a senior named Marcus Lee, stood up near the front. "I was in the cafeteria when the shooting started. I saw someone with a gun. It wasn't audio equipment. It was a real person with a real gun shooting at people." His voice was shaking but firm. Murmurs rippled through the auditorium, students turning to look at Marcus with renewed fear. Principal Whitmore's expression hardened. "Marcus, you were frightened and your mind played tricks on you. It's a common response to high-stress situations. Your brain filled in details that weren't there. I assure you, there was no gun." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but Assistant Principal Lopez had moved to stand near his row, arms crossed, expression stern. Marcus sat down slowly, looking around at other students like he was hoping someone would back him up. A girl near him nodded and stood as well. "I was there too. I saw the same thing Marcus did. People were running and screaming and there was blood. Real blood, not stage blood. A girl got shot in the leg. I saw it." This was getting out of hand and Principal Whitmore knew it. His pleasant facade was cracking. "That's enough. You're spreading panic based on misperceptions. Everyone remain seated and calm. The police will be here shortly to confirm what I'm telling you." But the girl wasn't done. "If nobody got hurt, where's Vanessa Ortiz? She was standing right next to me and she got shot and fell down, and then everyone was running. Where is she?" She was nearly shouting now, and other students were pulling out their phones, probably texting Vanessa or checking her social media. I didn't know Vanessa personally, but I searched for her on Instagram and found her account immediately. Her last post was from this morning, a selfie taken in the school bathroom with the caption, "Last day before spring break, let's survive this." There were hundreds of comments from the last 20 minutes, people asking if she was okay, saying they heard she was hurt, demanding updates. Nothing from Vanessa herself. The principal walked to the edge of the stage, his expression now openly angry. "Vanessa Ortiz left campus earlier today for a doctor's appointment. You're mistaken about who you saw. Now I need everyone to stop speculating and spreading misinformation. You're only making this situation worse." Mr. Kapoor stood up behind me, his voice loud enough to carry across the auditorium. "Then let us leave. If everything is safe and under control, open the doors and let students reunite with their parents." Principal Whitmore's jaw clenched, and for a long moment, he didn't respond. Then he said, in a voice that attempted to sound reasonable, "We can't release students while the police are conducting their sweep. It would interfere with their investigation and potentially put students at risk of being mistaken for threats. We need everyone to stay here, together, where we can account for you." That's when I understood. We weren't being protected. We were being contained. The principal wasn't trying to keep us safe from a threat outside. He was trying to keep us from learning the truth about what had actually happened. I looked at Mr. Kapoor and saw that he'd reached the same conclusion. He pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. Principal Whitmore noticed and pointed at him from the stage. "Mr. Kapoor, put your phone away. All students and teachers, phones away now. I don't want any more rumors spreading online." But it was too late. Half the auditorium was already on their phones, posting on social media, texting parents, calling news outlets. The silence was broken by buzzing and ringing and the soft glow of screens illuminating faces in the dimmed auditorium lighting. Vice Principal Dawson walked quickly up the aisle toward Mr. Kapoor, hand outstretched. "Give me your phone, Stephen. Now." Mr. Kapoor stood his ground. "No, I'm communicating with law enforcement about the situation. Unless you're ordering me to stop cooperating with police?" Dawson hesitated, clearly not wanting to answer that question. In that moment of hesitation, the auditorium's main doors burst open and 4 police officers entered, weapons drawn but pointed at the ground, moving with the controlled urgency of people trained for crisis situations. Principal Whitmore's head snapped toward them and his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track. Surprise, fear, anger, and finally, resignation. The lead officer, a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, spoke into a radio clipped to her shoulder. "We have approximately 500 individuals in the main auditorium, requesting backup and medical." She looked up at Principal Whitmore on the stage. "Sir, we need you to step down and come with us. Everyone else, remain seated and calm. We're here to help." Principal Whitmore didn't move. "Officer, as I've been trying to explain to everyone, this was a false alarm. A prank that got out of hand. There's no need for—" The officer cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Sir, we have 3 confirmed gunshot victims in the cafeteria wing. 1 is critical. We have a suspect in custody who was armed with a semi-automatic handgun and was attempting to leave through the east exit when our officers intercepted him. This is not a prank. Now step down from that stage and come with us. We have questions about why you told students the threat was neutralized when you had no confirmation of that." The auditorium erupted. Students screamed, cried, tried to stand up and rush for the exits. Teachers shouted for calm while simultaneously looking terrified themselves. I sat frozen in my seat, my brain trying to process what the officer had just said. 3 gunshot victims, 1 critical, a suspect with a real gun. The principal had lied. He'd deliberately lied and told us it was safe when someone had actually been shooting people in our school. Alicia was crying beside me, her whole body shaking. Mr. Kapoor put his hands on both our shoulders, steadying us. More police officers flooded into the auditorium, at least a dozen now, some in regular uniforms and some in tactical gear. They began organizing the chaos, directing students to stay seated, calling for any injured to identify themselves. Paramedics entered with stretchers and medical bags. Principal Whitmore was escorted off the stage by 2 officers, his hands behind his back but not cuffed yet. As he passed our row, he looked directly at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen in an adult before. Raw panic mixed with desperate defiance. He'd gambled that he could control the narrative and he'd lost. Vice Principal Dawson and Assistant Principal Lopez were also being separated from the student body, taken aside by officers for questioning. I heard one officer asking Dawson, "Why did you announce the all clear when you hadn't confirmed the threat was contained?" Dawson's response was too quiet to hear, but his posture was defensive, shoulders hunched like he expected to be hit. The lead officer took the stage microphone. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Brennan with the Metro Police Department. I need everyone to listen carefully. We have secured the building and the armed suspect is in custody. However, we need to account for every student and staff member, and we need statements from anyone who witnessed anything related to the shooting. You will be released to your parents in an organized fashion once we've verified your safety and collected necessary information. Medical personnel are here for anyone who needs assistance, physical or psychological." The evacuation process took 3 hours. Police separated us by what we'd witnessed, taking statements from those who'd been in the cafeteria wing when the shooting started, from those who'd seen the shooter, from those who'd interacted with him before the incident began. I was in the group that had been in lockdown away from the immediate danger, So my statement was relatively brief. I told them about hearing the shots, about the lockdown announcement, about Principal Whitmore opening doors and declaring it a prank, about being herded into the auditorium. The officer taking my statement, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 25, wrote everything down with a grave expression. Did Principal Whitmore give any explanation for why he believed it was a prank? He asked. I shook my head. He just kept insisting it was audio equipment and that we were overreacting. But Mr. Kapoor, our teacher, tried to tell him something was wrong. The principal threatened to put a note in his personnel file if he didn't cooperate. The officer underlined something in his notes. That's important. Thank you. Finally, they started releasing students to the front parking lot where hundreds of parents waited behind barriers. My mom grabbed me the second I came through the doors, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak, just holding me and checking me over for injuries like I might have been shot without noticing. My dad was there too, his face red and his jaw clenched in barely controlled rage. They wouldn't tell us anything, he said hoarsely. They kept saying they were assessing the situation while we watched SWAT teams go into the building. We thought. He didn't finish the sentence, just pulled me into another crushing hug. Around us, similar scenes were playing out. Parents reuniting with children, everyone crying or yelling or just standing in shocked silence. News crews had cameras pointed at the school entrance, reporters doing live updates. I heard one saying, "We're getting reports that the principal may have delayed police response by declaring the shooting was a prank. If true, this raises serious questions about the administration's judgment during this crisis." That was an understatement so massive it would have been funny if everything weren't so terrible. My parents drove me home in silence, my mom holding my hand in the backseat the entire drive. When we got home, she made me take a shower and change clothes, then wrapped me in blankets on the couch even though it was 70 degrees outside. My dad turned on the news and we watched coverage of our school, aerial shots showing police vehicles and ambulances, reporters interviewing traumatized students and furious parents. The details emerged slowly over the next several hours of coverage. The shooter was a 17-year-old junior named Kyle Brenner, who'd been bullied extensively and had made threats online that school administrators had reportedly been aware of but hadn't acted on. He'd brought his father's handgun to school in his backpack and had opened fire in the cafeteria during lunch period. 3 students were hit. Vanessa Ortiz, shot in the abdomen and currently in surgery in critical condition. Marcus Thompson, shot in the shoulder with non-life-threatening injuries. And David Chang, shot in the leg, treated and stable. Kyle had fired 12 rounds total before his gun jammed, then fled toward the east exit where police intercepted him. The entire attack lasted less than 4 minutes. But what dominated the coverage was Principal Whitmore's response. Multiple students and teachers had recorded videos on their phones, including one of Principal Whitmore announcing the lockdown was lifted and it was just a prank. The video showed him opening classroom doors while gunshots could still be heard in the distance. Another video showed him herding students toward the auditorium while a trail of blood was clearly visible on the floor behind him. The media crucified him. A press conference was held that evening by the superintendent of schools, a stern-looking woman named Dr. Catherine Frost. She stood at a podium flanked by police officials and school board members, her expression carefully neutral. Today's events at Riverside High School represent a catastrophic failure of leadership and judgment. Principal Gregory Whitmore made decisions that potentially endangered the lives of hundreds of students and staff. He announced the threat was neutralized without confirmation from law enforcement. He instructed students to leave secure locations, and he delayed emergency response by insisting the situation was a prank. These actions are indefensible. Principal Whitmore has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Vice Principal Michael Dawson and Assistant Principal Lucia Lopez, who followed Whitmore's directives, have also been placed on leave. The school board will be conducting a comprehensive review of all district emergency protocols and administrative oversight. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. To the students and families of Riverside High School, I offer my deepest apologies. You deserved better. Your children deserved better. We failed you today, and we will spend however long it takes to make this right and ensure nothing like this ever happens again. The investigation that followed was extensive and damning. It revealed that Principal Whitmore had received multiple reports about Kyle Brenner's threatening behavior in the weeks leading up to the shooting. Kyle had posted on social media about wanting revenge on students who'd humiliated him, had written violent stories in English class that teachers flagged as concerning, and had been overheard making specific threats about making them all pay. Each time, Whitmore had dismissed the reports as teenage drama or creative expression protected by free speech. He'd refused to involve police or even Kyle's parents, believing he could handle it internally. One teacher had resigned in protest 2 weeks before the shooting, submitting a resignation letter that explicitly stated she feared a violent incident was imminent and couldn't in good conscience remain at a school where her warnings were ignored. That letter had been in Whitmore's desk drawer, never forwarded to district administration. Even more damaging was the revelation about why Whitmore had declared the shooting a prank. According to his statement to investigators, he'd panicked when he realized a real shooting was happening because he knew he'd ignored all the warning signs. His career, his reputation, everything would be destroyed if it came out that he'd been warned and done nothing. So he'd made a split-second decision to try to control the narrative, to minimize what had happened and hope he could contain the fallout. He genuinely convinced himself that if he could just get everyone calm and gathered in one place, he could manage the situation and prevent it from becoming a media catastrophe. The irony was brutal. His attempt to avoid consequences had made those consequences infinitely worse. The criminal charges came swiftly. Principal Whitmore was charged with 3 counts of child endangerment, 1 count of obstruction of justice, and 1 count of official misconduct. Vice Principal Dawson and Assistant Principal Lopez were charged with lesser counts of child endangerment for following Whitmore's orders without questioning them. Kyle Brenner, the shooter, was charged as an adult with 3 counts of attempted murder, multiple weapons charges, and terrorism-related offenses. The trials were separate, but the media coverage linked them constantly. The story of an administrator who enabled violence through negligence and then endangered victims through cowardice. Mr. Kapoor became a minor hero in the news coverage. The teacher who'd defied the principal and tried to keep students safe, who'd stayed in contact with police throughout the ordeal. He gave interviews where he carefully avoided directly criticizing Whitmore, but made it clear he'd known something was wrong and regretted not being more forceful in his objections. "I should have refused to bring my students to the auditorium," he said in one interview. "I was afraid for my job, and that fear made me compliant when I should have been defiant. I'll live with that regret." Vanessa Ortiz survived her injuries after 2 surgeries and weeks in the ICU. When she was finally able to speak to reporters, she was remarkably composed but visibly traumatized. "I remember being in the cafeteria and hearing the first shot. I turned and saw Kyle standing there with a gun, and I couldn't process it because it was too surreal. Then he fired again, and I felt this impact in my stomach like being punched, and I fell down. People were screaming and running, stepping on me, and I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die there on the cafeteria floor. When I woke up in the hospital and my parents told me the principal had told everyone it was a prank while I was bleeding out, I couldn't believe it. How could an adult, someone responsible for our safety, be that wrong?" She paused, crying now. "He chose his reputation over our lives. That's what it comes down to. He was more worried about looking bad than about whether we lived or died." Her words resonated with the public and became a rallying cry for school safety reform. Parents organized, demanding better threat assessment protocols, mandatory reporting procedures that couldn't be overridden by individual administrators, and independent oversight of school safety decisions. The trials stretched over a year. Kyle Brenner pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25. His father was charged with criminal negligence for failing to secure the weapon Kyle had used, receiving probation and a massive fine. Principal Whitmore went to trial, his defense arguing that he'd made an honest mistake under pressure and that his actions, while misguided, weren't criminal. The prosecution dismantled this argument with clinical precision. They brought in expert witnesses on school safety who testified that Whitmore's decisions violated every established protocol. They played the videos of him declaring the shooting a prank while blood was visible in the hallways. They presented testimony from over 30 students and teachers about being forced out of secure lockdown locations and herded into an auditorium where they were sitting targets if the shooter had found them. Most damaging was the testimony from Lieutenant Brennan, the officer who'd entered the auditorium. She described arriving at the school to find the suspect still active, victims bleeding in the cafeteria, and hundreds of students gathered in an unsecured auditorium on the principal's orders. "If the shooter had made it to that auditorium, we would have been responding to a massacre," she said quietly. "The concentration of targets, the lack of cover, the single point of entry, it would have been catastrophic." The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Principal Whitmore was sentenced to 8 years in prison, the judge noting that while his actions didn't constitute intentional harm, they represented such extreme negligence and self-interest that they warranted significant punishment. Vice Principal Dawson and Assistant Principal Lopez received suspended sentences and probation, their careers in education over but their freedom preserved in recognition that they'd been following orders from a superior. The civil suits were even more devastating. Vanessa's family sued the school district for $10 million, settling for $7 million. The other shooting victims settled for lesser amounts. Dozens of other families sued for psychological trauma their children suffered, both from the shooting itself and from being endangered by Whitmore's decisions. The total payout exceeded $20 million, forcing the district to cut programs and lay off staff. Riverside High School became synonymous with institutional failure, and enrollment plummeted as families moved to other districts or enrolled children in private schools. 2 years after the shooting, the district closed Riverside permanently, consolidating students into other schools. The building sat empty, a memorial and a warning. I testified at Whitmore's trial, describing what it felt like to be told we were safe when we weren't, to be herded into the auditorium while knowing something was wrong but being powerless to resist. The prosecutor asked me, "Did you trust Principal Whitmore's judgment in that moment?" I thought about my answer carefully. No. I knew he was lying or wrong or both, but he was the principal, the authority figure, and we're taught our whole lives to trust authorities and do what they say. Even when every instinct was screaming that we were in danger, most of us complied because that's what we'd been conditioned to do. That's what made it so terrifying. Not just the shooter, but the realization that the adult supposed to protect us was either incompetent or actively harmful, and we had no recourse. The prosecutor nodded gravely. Did his actions that day change how you view authority figures? I looked directly at Whitmore, who was sitting at the defense table avoiding eye contact. Yes. I'll never blindly trust someone just because they have a title or position. Trust has to be earned through actions, not assumed through hierarchy. He taught me that lesson with nearly fatal consequences for 3 of my classmates. The shooting changed all of us who survived it. Some students transferred schools immediately, unable to face the building where it happened. Others, like me, stayed but were never the same. I developed anxiety that required therapy and medication to manage. Loud noises made me flinch violently for years afterward. I couldn't sit in rooms without knowing where the exits were and having a mental escape plan. My grades dropped my senior year because I couldn't concentrate, my brain constantly scanning for threats. Alicia and I stayed friends, but our relationship was forever marked by shared trauma. We could talk to each other about things we couldn't discuss with anyone else, the specific terror of that day, the anger at being betrayed by someone who should have protected us. We both ended up going to therapy, sometimes together, working through the complex feelings of survivors' guilt and powerlessness and rage. Mr. Kapoor left teaching after that year, telling reporters that he couldn't continue in a profession where he'd been punished for trying to keep students safe. The district had put a formal reprimand in his file for insubordination during the incident, and while they eventually removed it under public pressure, the damage was done. He became an advocate for teacher autonomy and safety decisions, arguing that individual teachers should be empowered to override administrative directives when student safety was at stake. Vanessa became the public face of the survivors, giving speeches at schools and conferences about threat assessment and emergency response. She walked with a cane now, permanent nerve damage from her injuries, but she refused to let that stop her. I want every student to know that if something feels wrong, if an authority figure is telling you to do something that your instincts say is dangerous, you have the right to refuse, she said in a speech at a national school safety conference. We've spent so much time teaching kids to be obedient that we've made them vulnerable to bad judgment from adults. Obedience isn't the highest virtue. Survival is. Critical thinking is. If I could go back to that day, I'd want every student in that auditorium to walk out when they felt unsafe, regardless of what the principal said. Civil disobedience isn't just for political movements, sometimes it's literally life-saving. Her words sparked controversy, some arguing she was encouraging students to disrespect authority. But most people, especially those who'd lived through similar situations, understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is follow orders without question. 5 years after the shooting, I graduated from college with a degree in educational policy. My senior thesis was about decision-making protocols in school emergencies and the need for distributed authority rather than top-down hierarchical control. I argued that principals shouldn't have unilateral power to override safety protocols, that teachers and even students should have mechanisms to challenge decisions that endanger lives. My thesis advisor, a former superintendent, told me it was the most passionate academic work he'd read in 30 years of teaching. "You're writing from experience that most education policymakers can't imagine," he said. "Use that. Make them understand what happens when the system fails." I took his advice and became a consultant for school districts revising their emergency procedures. I traveled around the country, sitting in boardrooms and speaking at conferences, telling the story of Riverside High School and Principal Whitmore's catastrophic choices. Some administrators resisted my recommendations, uncomfortable with the idea of distributing power or creating channels for questioning authority, but most listened, especially after I showed them the videos from that day, watching a principal declare a real shooting a prank while students bled in nearby hallways. Principal Whitmore served 6 years of his 8-year sentence before being released on parole. He was prohibited from working in education in any capacity and required to register as a convicted child endangerer. I saw an interview with him shortly after his release, conducted by a journalist writing a book about school shootings. Whitmore looked older, grayer, diminished in a way that went beyond physical appearance. "I made decisions in a moment of crisis that I can never take back," he said, his voice hollow. "I told myself I was trying to prevent panic, but the truth is I was trying to prevent my own accountability. I knew I'd ignored warnings about Kyle, and when the shooting started, all I could think about was how it would destroy me. So I tried to minimize it, to control it, to make it something less catastrophic than it was. And in doing so, I endangered hundreds of children. 3 of them were shot, and any one of them could have died because I was thinking about my career instead of their lives. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want people to learn from my failure." The interviewer asked if he thought his prison sentence was fair. Whitmore nodded slowly. "It was merciful. Those students got a lifetime of trauma because of my choices. 8 years isn't enough to balance that, but it's what the law allows. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I failed in the most fundamental way an educator can fail." I watched that interview with mixed feelings, anger and pity tangled together in a way that still hadn't resolved after years of therapy. Part of me wanted to see him as a monster, but he was just a man who made terrible choices under pressure, choices driven by ego and fear rather than malice. That made it harder to hate him, but no easier to forgive him. The shooting at Riverside High School became a case study in education programs, a perfect example of how not to handle an emergency. But it was more than that. It was a story about the danger of unchecked authority, about what happens when people in power prioritize their own interests over those they're supposed to serve. It was about the importance of questioning, of trusting your instincts even when they contradict official statements. Most of all, it was about the responsibility that comes with power over others' safety and the catastrophic consequences when that responsibility is betrayed. 10 years after the shooting, Vanessa and I met for coffee in the city where we both lived now. She'd become a lawyer specializing in education law, representing families in school safety cases. I'd become a policy consultant, an occasional expert witness in similar cases. We'd both turned our trauma into purpose, though neither of us would choose that path if we could go back and prevent the shooting from happening at all. "Do you think about it every day?" Vanessa asked me, stirring her coffee slowly. I nodded. Not as vividly as I used to, but it's always there. Like background noise I can't turn off. You? She smiled sadly. Every day, especially when I'm in courtrooms arguing about whether administrators properly assessed threats or followed protocols. I keep thinking about how Kyle showed so many warning signs and Whitmore ignored every one of them. How many other Kyles are out there right now, displaying the same signs, and how many other Whitmores are dismissing them because acknowledging them is inconvenient? We sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about the alternate timeline where someone had listened, where action had been taken, where 3 students hadn't been shot and hundreds more hadn't been traumatized. "We can't save everyone," I said finally, "but maybe we can save some. Maybe all the policies I help write, all the cases you win, maybe they add up to something that prevents the next Riverside." Vanessa nodded and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "That has to be enough. It has to be." The memorial outside the sealed Riverside High School building still had fresh flowers on it a decade later, families and survivors leaving tributes to what was lost and what could have been lost. 3 lives that survived but were forever altered. Hundreds of childhoods shortened by trauma. A community's trust destroyed. All because one man chose his reputation over truth, control over safety, authority over wisdom. I visited the memorial once a year on the anniversary, standing with other survivors who gathered to remember and to recommit to preventing it from happening again. We knew we couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the choices Principal Whitmore made or the bullets Kyle fired, but we could speak the truth about what happened loudly and repeatedly until no other principal could claim they didn't know better, until no other administrator could prioritize their career over students' lives without understanding the full weight of that choice. The flowers at the memorial would fade and be replaced, but the lessons written in blood and terror and betrayal would remain as long as any of us survived to tell the story. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.